Before we begin, I wanted to make a quick correction about last week's episode. When I was sharing the update on the Ethan Couch case, I mistakenly said he was responsible for the deaths of 4 teenagers. That was incorrect. Ethan Couch was the driver, and there were 7 other teens in his truck, several of whom were injured, with one, Sergio Molina, who became paralyzed due to the accident. The victims who were killed were Brianna Mitchell, age 24, who had pulled her car over to the side of the road after having car trouble, Holly Boyles, 52, and his daughter Shelby, age 21, and Brian Jennings, a 43-year-old father, who'd also stopped to help. I apologize for the mistake. All the correct detailed information on the case can be heard in episode 83 from March 2018. I should have reviewed all the details before I recorded the updated information on the case. I will be more careful to do so in the future. Thank you. Now, on to the show.
This podcast details true crime cases. It contains adult themes and may contain descriptions of violence. It is not intended for children. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you all for joining me once again for Once Upon a Crime. And this time, as I promised you guys, I'm going to have a special episode. We're having some special episodes here in December, like I like to do for the end of the year. And today I'm really excited because I'm going to be talking about a case that I learned about a long time ago, and it was always stayed on my mind, but I really haven't heard anybody else talk about it very much. And I decided the perfect guest to help me with this story would be Erica Kelly from Southern Fried True Crime. Hey, Erica, how you doing?
Hey there, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, and I'll tell you a little bit why I decided Erica would be a great person, because this is a little bit of a Southern Fried story, I think. And
For
this
sure.
is a story about Jerry Lee Lewis, and we'll talk about who that is. You guys probably know the name, right? I mean, I'm not the only old timer around here, I hope, that knows that name, but he is a legendary musician. He is from the South. And this story, I became interested in this story about the mysterious death of his 5th wife, Shawn Lewis, a long time ago. And I don't know exactly when, but I remember reading this article. And there's this really awesome article written by a journalist by the name of Richard Ben Cramer. He wrote this for Rolling Stone back in 1984, and the name of the article was The Strange and Mysterious Death of Mrs. Jerry Lee Lewis. So when I see a title like that of an article, I don't know about you, Erica, but I have to read it. What is this about, right?
I love the Rolling Stone. There's so much good stuff there. Yes.
Yeah, they have some awesome journalists. Again, like I said, I was really surprised about it because I didn't know anything about this story. Well, I really don't know a lot about Jerry Lee Lewis. I mean, I know a little bit of his songs because they played on the radio, or you see them in movies a lot.
Did you watch the movie Great Balls of Fire?
Yes, I did watch it, and I watched that. I think it was later after. I'm not sure when it was, but I know it wasn't when it first came out. And I did watch it.
Because I was a huge, I am still a huge Winona Ryder fan, but I think I knew a little bit more about Jerry Lee Lewis because I come from a family of musicians. And my dad is one of those freaks that could play by ear. He didn't read music, but he could do every Jerry Lee Lewis song. And that was always the fun part of a party. So I knew about him. And then that movie came out and I was just like, what? But I never knew about the dead wife.
I'm going to have Erica tell you a little bit about his background and his life. But that movie really was based on the book written by his very young wife, Myra, right? And so it pretty much told that part of his life. He was married several times. Obviously, I said that was his 5th wife. So he was married more times than that. I'm going to go ahead and let Erica tell us a little bit about Jerry Lee Lewis, and we'll go from there.
All right. Well, Jerry Lee Lewis, he was born in Faraday, Louisiana in 1935, September, to a poor farming family. He started playing piano at a very young age with 2 cousins who would become extremely famous in their own right, Mickey Gilley, who was a country music singer, and of course, Jimmy Swaggart, the television evangelist who was,
That was a surprise to me. And Jimmy Swaggart was his cousin. I
want to say that the only reason I remembered that is because it was in that movie too. But
okay. I didn't remember that part. Yeah.
I think Alec Baldwin played Jimmy Swaggart. I could be wrong.
Really? Okay, now I'm gonna have to watch it again.
That movie, part of it feels so fictional, and then the more you dig into it, no, it's actually a lot of it was pretty real. So, but yeah, Jerry Lee began playing and singing gospel music at the age of 9. He was raised in the Assembly of God Church, but he was also heavily influenced by country music, R&B, and of course rock. He liked to blend these genres with his own unique version of rockabilly, which would catch on with young audiences in the 1950s. And, this kind of created a dichotomy within Jerry Lee, because throughout his life, he remained in conflict between his Christian roots and his love of rock and roll. He even attended the Southwest Bible Institute, but at a church assembly, he played a worldly version of the gospel song, My God is Real, and was expelled. He returned to Louisiana and started playing in honky tonks. His energy and showmanship on stage, combined with his virtuoso piano playing, earned him a reputation as an up-and-coming star in the local rock and roll scene.
What you said about his being conflicted with the Christian roots and then the rock, that was pretty common back then, right? Because I'm thinking of like Johnny Cash, right? Didn't he start playing gospel? I think a lot of those guys did. I mean, it was the Bible Belt, correct?
Well, and ironically, my dad was the same way. I mean, raised in the church, but you grew up in he was born in the 50s, but grew up in the 60s and 70s. And yeah, he was kind of weaned on gospel and country, but then kind of turned away from it. Whereas I think, people of Jerry Lee and Johnny Cash's generation struggled with it even more. Mm-hmm. But the thing I love, like when you talk about his showmanship, I mean, it's not just, you can watch that one movie and actually Dennis Quaid does a really good job of doing it. But if you ever see a video of him, like kicking away the piano stool and going after it, like it's incredible. There's just no two ways about it. He was really, really great. Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I'm sure it has a lot to do with his. I don't want to psychoanalyze him.
We can do that later, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so he cut his first demo in 1954 and moved to Nashville, where he played in clubs and bars. He was unable to secure an invitation to perform at the Grand Ole Opry, so he continued to play in Memphis, where he auditioned for Sun Records. And he began as basically a studio musician. Like he was a backer for big names like Carl Perkins and Johnny Cash, like we talked about.
So the Grand Ole Opry, though, and that's kind of like the holy grail of
It is. But, at the Grand Ole Opry, you really have to do the country. You can't go crazy. You can't be kicking out bar stools and making it rock and roll. At least not back then. You know what I mean? So I can see why he would not have fit in, but while he was still a huge hit in Memphis, because that's, Memphis and Knoxville, like were also really big for blues and rock and roll. So that makes a lot of sense to me. And his solo career began with Jerry Lee Lewis and his pumping piano in 1957. The songs that became hits, which I think everybody knows, the biggest one, Great Balls of Fire, that's what the movie's named after, but also a whole lot of shaking going on. His high energy and flamboyant style, I mean, fans just loved him. I mean, this was a little bit pre-Beatles, and, a little bit around, a little bit before Elvis Presley, but he definitely evoked the same kind of fanaticism in his audience. The ladies loved him. Everybody screamed. It was, it was new. I mean, before Elvis the Pelvis, there was this too. And, it was basically kicking off a whole new generation of those kind of shocking musicians. They're not shocking to us now. We've seen it all. Right. But then that was incredible.
Did your parents have like record albums when you were a kid that you used to look at the covers of them and that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. I still have most of mine. I unfortunately had a house party when I was like 22, and oddly enough, somebody stole all the records, but not the album covers.
Oh my God.
I don't know. Isn't that awful? I would rather you just take the whole thing. It made me so angry. But actually now I'm kind of...
Now you know what you have. You know what you don't have, right?
Well, I know. But at least I think I'm going to actually frame them one day. Because, I mean, I've got a lot of really cool original album covers that most people would.
And that's what I was going to say. So I remember looking at these album covers. And, before, like, say, the late 50s, early 60s, everybody looked the same. They're wearing, like, cardigan sweaters and ties and, that kind of thing. And so it was much more, like, I don't know, calm, acceptable, I guess, music.
Yeah. Well, it was buttoned down. It was formulaic. And there was a certain formula for a boy band or for a musician. And, aside from just like, the kicking of the piano bench and I believe he stood on top of the piano and things like that. He got a lot of criticism from radio stations for his antics. And they often refused to play his music and said he was obscene, which... looking back, like I remember they called Elvis the pelvis obscene, but when you actually listen to the lyrics of the songs, like I don't see how they could call that obscene. But I mean,
I mean, you can't compare it to today, but yeah, then it was pretty risque, I guess.
yeah, for sure. And then, of course, well, Jerry Lee, as we have established, was very hot with the ladies, and he wasn't a ladies' man. And he was also the marrying kind. He wed for the first time when he was just 16, and that marriage only lasted for 20 months. Once his divorce was finalized, he was already moving on to wife number 2. Her name was Jane Mitchum. They were married for 4 years and had 2 children, Jerry Lee Jr. in 1954 and Ronnie Guy in 1956. And unfortunately, Jerry Lee Jr. died in a car accident when he was 19.
One of the things we're going to see here with Jerry Lee is that he gets, divorced and remarried so quickly. Like sometimes the divorce isn't even finalized yet before he's on to the next.
Overlap for sure.
Yeah. He get married at 16, dude. Like,
and the thing of it, like that actually wasn't all that strange back then, but it's a good lead into his next marriage because, people getting married at 16 was not as unusual and horrifying as we would think of it as now. However, his next marriage would be. His next marriage was to his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown. And it wasn't just that she was 13. She was also his first cousin. And that is actually, it's so strange. I was actually reading about this the other day. That's actually still legal in many states. You can still marry your first cousin. It's legal in many parts of Western civilization. There's not nearly as much, I guess, stigma and worries of birth defects as there were. But I mean, back then it wasn't just that she was 13. It was also that she was his cousin.
And by this time he was how old? He was in his 20s, right? 22, 23, something like that.
Yeah, I can't math in my head.
I know. Still, come on, 22, 23 to 13, that's quite
it's quite the age difference, but I'm just going to go ahead and say at 22, you're still really not making the best decisions. Especially someone like him who, they say about a lot of people, and especially what you would consider child stars, and considering his early success, you kind of almost get stuck at that age where you became famous. And so he remained kind of a child man in that way, I think. Yeah, okay, so that was December of 57 that he married his 13-year-old cousin. And the next spring he went on tour in Europe, and the press caught wind of it, which I think it had kind of been hushed down in the U.S. from what I remember. It's not like it wasn't known, but nobody made such a big deal out of it. Mm-hmm. But it became a public outrage in Europe when it was found out. And the rest of the tour was canceled. He was sent back to the U.S. in disgrace. And then, of course, after he got back, the U.S. was like, oh, well, of course, the British thought it was terrible. Now we really refused to play his records, and all his TV appearances were canceled. It really, really did hurt his career. He had to kind of turn his sights back to country music, which was not really his passion. But in the late 1960s, he did have a few hits on the country charts. And then he recorded more country albums into the 70s that became hits. He actually scored 17 top 10 hits on the country charts between 1968 and 1977, which is, nothing to sneeze at. He became a pretty big star in the 70s, correct? I mean, especially in country music. And I guess by then, people forgot. Myra grew up. Yeah. I'm trying to remember how long they stayed married. They did have 2 children. Mm-hmm. They had one. So oh my God, she had a baby in 59 and they married at 57. So she had a baby at 15. Oh, wow. Yeah. That's the first child. And then they didn't have another Phoebe until 1963. So 6 years later. So it was at least 21 when she had the second one. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, Jerry Lee lost another child, and Myra did as well. Steve Allen drowned in their swimming pool at the age of 3. Yeah, it's horrible. And they were still married for about 7 more years. They divorced in 1970. Myra cited physical and mental abuse as well as adultery in her reasoning for filing. Yeah, I don't think he was a very loyal man to his wives. No, I don't think anybody would ever accuse him of that. Right. Not at all. Jerry Lee, early on in his career, earned the nickname The Killer for much of his frenzied piano playing as much for his temper. Right. And it wasn't just kicking over piano benches. He liked to smash beer bottles on stage, and he picked fights famously with lots of famous people. And Myra wrote in her book that was made into that film, Great Balls of Fire, that there were many instances that Jerry Lee would come home drunk and stoned on pills, and he would beat her. He was extremely jealous and possessive, and pretty much all of his exes would report that he had beat them as well as cheated on him during their marriages. The beating is bad enough, but he was a serial adulterer. Yeah. He also had a really bad history of being reckless with weapons. He had easily threatened people who angered him by waving guns around. And in 1971, I'm going to put quote unquote accidentally shot almost killed a bass player because he hit him in the chest.
Right.
So it's a miracle the dude lived. While waving around his gun recklessly. The musician sued, but as usual, Jerry Lee Lewis got out of it. It's a miracle he lived, though, getting shot in the chest that way. Yeah. This wasn't his only high-profile instance with a weapon. In 1976, he showed up at Elvis's home at Graceland. He was high on pills and drunk on champagne, and he crashed his Lincoln Continental into the gates of the Graceland mansion. He had placed a loaded pistol on the dashboard and was swigging from a champagne bottle. And then he attempted to hurl the bottle out the car's window as he drove up to the house, smashing the window and the bottle. And Elvis was actually watching from inside the home on a closed circuit camera. And he called the Memphis police, who arrested Jerry Lee Lewis for public drunkenness and a weapons charge. And he was released on a $250 bond, which, of course, that sounds like nothing. I don't really... I
$10 for him, right?
What today's money is, but that really still was peanuts even back then.
Yeah. For him especially, because he was pretty well.
I don't remember. I should have looked that up too, but I mean, I'm pretty sure he gained and lost several fortunes too.
Yeah, that's true.
And then a year after Myra divorced him, he married a woman named Shawn Lewis. In 1972, she gave birth to their daughter, Lori Lee. And they were married until 1982. And it never ceases to astonish me how long these women stay married to him. Myra and the other one, it was several years of it. He definitely had a hold over them, whether it was emotional, financial, real love, whatever it was. He did manage to stay married for.
Well, I did read a little bit about Myra and her marriage to Jerry Lee, because it's just fascinating to me. It
is to me too.
One of the stories was that when she left to marry him, that the only thing she had big enough to put her clothes in to take with her was a dollhouse. So she took her dollhouse packed with clothes to her wedding to this 22 or 23-year-old guy, which is crazy. And the other thing that she said is that he basically left her with his mother and sister to, he was on the road. She said she counts 3 nights that he was actually home during their marriage.
Wow.
That he was never there. So that may be how they could stay long enough, because he just wasn't there. She said when he was in town, he was out all night, playing gigs and then out partying, and she just didn't see him. It was almost like she was another sister, at least to his mother. You know what I mean? Like the mother raised her.
Well, as young as she was. Yeah, of course. Between the touring and the partying and everything else, that makes a lot of sense. After the divorce petition in 1982, actually the petition would state that he, quote, had an extremely violent temper, especially when he becomes intoxicated on alcohol and or drugs, and that he had choked the plaintiff on numerous occasions, beaten her, knocked her down the stairs, and threatened her life. And this is everything that Jaron said. And, that's pretty damning. She didn't just file for irreconcilable differences. Right. And that was probably a big part of the problem, because she was looking for a lot of support. The petition further stated that a month before the divorce filing, she had contacted Jerry Lee to ask for financial assistance for her and their daughter. And he became angry, according to Jaron, and told her that she shouldn't worry about support because, quote, you're not going to be around very long. If you don't get off my back, you will end up in the bottom of the lake at the farm with chains on you. And then on June 8th, 1982, right before their divorce settlement was final, Shawn Lewis was found dead, drowned at the bottom of a swimming pool.
Yeah, there's not a lot of information about that.
I can't even see that one was ever even investigated. I think it was just an immediate, this was accidental. That I guess they didn't bother to look into the divorce and the accusations. It was just considered an accidental death.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, just very strange coincidence if that's what it was, that's how she died. But there's a lot of...
You have two people in your family that died in a pool. I'm not claiming that he killed his son, but That is quite a coincidence. Like
I would think I wouldn't have a pool at that point in my life. You know what I mean? Like I'd get rid of the pool. But
I
he
would,
always
yeah,
had a pool.
yeah. Well, yeah, I know. And rich people usually do, but like I think after that kind of tragedy of losing a child, I'd be done with it too. But either
Yeah,
way, what are the odds of two people drowning in your pool at home? Like that's,
right.
I
Very
don't know.
strange.
Yes.
So what happens at this point in his life is like he's going through this contentious divorce with Jaren, and she seems like she's a pretty assertive woman because she wasn't just going to walk away like other women in his life. She was really kind of fighting him for financial support and alimony and all those things and taking care of the kids. And he just basically wanted to be done with her. He didn't want to have anything to do with it, and this is why she had to call him and say, hey, you need to give us some money here. We need money to live off of and your kids. And he just got really angry about it. Basically, leave me alone, or else. But at the same time, while he was going through this, the other thing too, during this time, he was also going through famously, because there's a lot of in history about this written about all of his tax problems. And so that was the other portion of it so all of these things were going on at the same time. And then right around this same time is when he meets Shawn. Are you racking your brain to figure out what to get for that hard to buy for family member or the perfect gift for an upcoming gift exchange? Well, I've got the perfect suggestion for you. Something everybody loves. Bombas socks. Bombas makes gift giving this holiday season easy peasy. I love my Bombas socks. They're super soft, like pillows for your feet. And they also provide a special built-in arch support that keeps your feet from tiring out quickly, like during all those miles you'll be walking in the mall to do your holiday shopping. And there's something for everyone. Performance socks for your sporty spice friends, merino wool socks that are so luxurious, perfect for your posh spice mates, and even something for baby spice. Toddler socks with built-in grippies to keep them from slipping while walking in just their socks. Fabulous. And if, like me, you're all about giving during this season, get this. Bombas donates a pair of their awesome socks to someone in need for every pair you purchase. That is so cool. To get Bombas for yourself, your friends, and family, they make great stocking stuffers, and help someone in need this holiday season, go to bombas.com/once to get 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/once. I've got so much on my mind and so much to do during the holidays, sometimes it can be hard to relax. Does that happen to you? I toss and turn, making lists in my head of everything on my plate, and then I'm exhausted the next morning because I didn't get a good night's sleep. No bueno. I've found that my Onyx and Rose cannabinoid-infused products help me to relax, release stress, and enjoy a peaceful night's sleep. Onyx and Rose offers premium CBD products, including oils, capsules, bliss bombs, bath bombs, and more. What is CBD? It's one of the many chemical compounds found in hemp that interacts with receptors in our bodies to produce therapeutic benefits for the mind and body. CBD can help athletes improve recovery, and it can help with pain management, inflammation, and to calm anxiety and reduce stress. Drop an Onyx and Rose CBD Botanic Bath Bomb into your tub to soak away the stress. I love the Calm Bath Bomb, containing 35 milligrams of CBD, lavender essential oil, and amber fragrance oil. It's also vegan and cruelty-free. After that, I'm all set to drift off to sleep and stay asleep to get a full night's rest. And all Onyx and Rose products are made with 100% American and organically grown hemp, are third-party tested, and they post all their lab reports to give you peace of mind. And Onyx and Rose is offering a special deal just for my listeners. Go to onyxandrose.com/once and use offer code ONCE at checkout for 15% off your first purchase. That's ONYX and rose.com/once. And don't forget to use offer code ONCE for 15% off. Shawn Stephens was a much younger woman than Jerry Lee at the time. She was a petite beauty, and she was from Dearborn, Michigan. So she was a Yankee, and that's what he used to call her. She was a Yankee. Yeah, because, she was from the North. after graduating from high school in 1975, she worked various jobs around her hometown, worked fast food restaurants. She was a server. She was did office help. And then after she turned 21, she became a cocktail waitress at the Hyatt Regency Hotel. She made friends with her coworkers, managers. Everybody liked her. By all accounts, she was just a really nice girl. Yeah. And she was described by everybody as just very high energy. She was very fun. She was a little flirty, But she did have a longtime boyfriend named Scott, who I'm not sure. I think it might have been her high school boyfriend. He went on to working in a factory. He was a factory worker. And she really loved Scott. Scott was the love of her life. And she wanted to marry him. She thought they were going to get married. But for some reason, his family didn't like her that much. They thought that he could do better. And they really discouraged the romance. And it kind of sounds like Scott was a little bit of a mama's boy. It sounded to me like he might have had a little bit of a controlling mother or something like that. And she's, one of those moms, maybe she's one of those no girl's good for my boy or kind of thing. Who knows, right?
You know what? They're still around to this day. So hey.
So Shawn, she's there. She starts meeting people at the Hyatt. Now, the Hyatt was, like I said, a cocktail lounge, and they would have musical acts that would come in and they would play gigs there. And so there was always musicians around that would perform at the hotel. And, they saw these cute girls, these, cocktail servers, and they would invite them afterwards to parties, right? The parties at the hotel or parties at the clubs or whatever. And this was, of course, it's got to be fun for a 21-year-old girl. Of course, this is like, wow, from a small town where, you work at restaurants and you work in factories, and here's these guys, and they've got some money and they want to spend them on these, pretty girls and stuff. So she would go out with her friends and go to these parties and hang out with these musicians, right? So some of the girls started dating some of these band members and some of the crew that would come into town. Her friend, Pam Brewer, began a relationship with J.W. Whitten, who was the longtime band manager for Jerry Lee Lewis. They actually became engaged, and Shawn started seeing that things were a little different now for her friend. She was traveling with her boyfriend, who had a lot of money, and they would travel by private jet. He would buy her expensive clothes. She got to hang out with celebrities and all of those things. And of course, to Shawn, this seems like a great life. Wow, you're just being treated like a queen, right?
Well, to anybody. And then think about how young she was. Like,
oh yeah.
Of course. I mean, and that had to be, she obviously came from humble beginnings. Like, it's not that she was great rich herself. So yeah, I can imagine how intoxicating that is.
And just a lot of fun, right? At that age. I mean, come on. I remember when I was 21, it's like, I wasn't trying to like go for a career all the time. I was like, wanted to hang out with my friends.
I was still bartending at 21. This is another thing like I kind of related to. I worked in a big hip hop bar, and I met lots of weirdos and celebrities, and famously, I cannot think of the band's name, but they were the guys that they were one hit wonders because I got high.
Okay.
They hilariously took like half our staff into their van and got everybody stoned, and nobody could hardly finish their shift. So those kind of people come in, and everybody is just starstruck. And so you can only imagine how a young girl that she didn't grow up that way. She wasn't around celebrities. She didn't know.
And that's the thing I was going to say about Shawn, because everything that I read about her and things that her family would say later is that she seemed like she was a girl that, she wanted to have a good time and have fun, but she was no worldly person at all. Like she was kind of really out of her element when she was in these circles of people. She's just a hometown girl. She just wanted to get married to her boyfriend and have a family and live a normal life. But then all of this other stuff kind of swept into her life. And I think she kind of got caught up in it. But I don't think that she was at all, she was very young and naive, so I can see where this is going to take a turn because, now she's going to meet Jerry Lee Lewis. So
you can also see how it's almost kind of like a rebound thing. If the love of my life and his parents don't think we should get married, you know what? Well, here's this great, cool guy that I just met. Like, he's super famous and rich. So yeah, of course he's going to turn her head.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And that's exactly what happened. So in February 1981, Jerry Lee's band was booked to play for a week at the Hyatt, and he saw, pretty petite Shawn, and he asked about her. So she wasn't expecting to date this guy. He was, she was 23 years old. She was half of his age, but her friend Pam, because she was dating his band manager and actually engaged to his band manager, Pam encouraged her to meet him, and she invited Shawn to a party in this hotel room. Just like you said, she was thinking, hey, I'm no closer to getting married to Scott. And she thought, well, why not have some fun, right? So she went to the party where Jerry Lee really paid her special attention that night. He really kind of turned on the charm. And by all accounts, he could be charming, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, of course, he's playing the piano. He's singing a song directly to her. It's got to make a young girl like her who hasn't been around much feel pretty special, right?
Yeah.
So she was flattered to have his attention, but to be honest, she said that he's an old dude, right? You're 23, he's 46 or 45, whatever he was. She even thought he might be a good match for her mom. She was like, I'm going to go home and tell my mom about him. So, he's talking it up and saying, hey, you should come with us to Memphis. And we're going to play another gig there. And he invited her to come. So she said, well, that sounds like fun. Her friend Pam was going to be going, so she decided to go. But he was also about to embark on a tour to Europe. Now, think about that, man. You get it, then he invites her to come along to Europe. God's sakes. I mean, you would think she might think, I might never have another opportunity, right?
Of course not.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So she totally accepted. She accepted, she went. And he started showering her with gifts and treated her like a princess. I mean, she's on a private jet. She's going to all these, she's staying in these 5-star hotels. I mean, it's just a great life, right?
Yeah.
And he's really good to her at first. And this was Jerry Lee's also his pattern, is that he would meet these girls and he'd be, awesome and amazing and charming and, you're the love of my life and all of this stuff. What we'll see is that as soon as he has them, either married to them or they're living with him or whatever, he turns and he becomes very possessive and jealous and angry and threatened all the time. He just feels threatened all the time for whatever reason. Plus the fact that he did have substance abuse problems. So he liked to take pills, a lot of uppers before he performed. And then he'd be up all night. He wouldn't, of course, after the gig's over, he's still up. So it's time to go have a party. And he expected Shawn, as his new girlfriend, to stay awake with him. So she was kind of stuck in that mode. But then he takes her to live with him. So he has his house and, he has his mansion, basically. And this, again, there's a pool in his backyard, but this one's shaped like a piano. I think that was in the movie, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought I remembered something about a piano.
We might have mixed that up a bit because I'm not sure that's actually where Myra lived.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But, I think that was a famous story that he has this pool shaped like a piano. So they had to throw that in there somewhere. So Shawn, he loved to lay out by the pool sunbathing. While Jerry Lee, he would sleep off his hangover from the night before. And then they'd get ready and go out to the club. He'd take her out to the clubs because, he basically was partying every single night, right? I don't know how many years you can do that. It just seems like it would be rough.
Richards, he's going to outlive us all. I guess it depends on your drug of choice.
Yeah, I think Keith Richards is pickled at this point. So
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think it depends on the drug and what you're doing. But isn't Jerry Lee still alive?
Yeah, he is.
It's kind of amazing.
It's very amazing. It's like, so, he'd be asleep. Then, like I said, they go to the clubs. The favorite place to go was a place called Hernando's Hideaway in Memphis. And there was a lot of very famous stories about antics of Jerry Lee at Hernando's Hideaway in Memphis, because that was like his home place that he would hang out.
That's probably, Nesbitt must be pretty close to Memphis.
And it was reported that he would always start ready to party, having a good time. But the more he drank, the worse his mood got. And like you said earlier, he would often pick fights with whoever was around. And everyone knew that Jerry carried weapons. No one wanted to cross him. He was a very mean drunk.
It wasn't even just weapons. He just always picked fights.
He was a skinny guy his whole life. I guess you call that lanky.
Yes, that was the word.
So Shawn was just one of these people that she was just a nice girl. She liked to keep things calm. She was good at kind of talking him down. She learned how to read his moods. Now that's pretty typical of somebody who's in an abusive relationship, right?
Yes, very much.
Mm-hmm. So she learned how to read his moods. Sometimes she could calm him down. At other times, she just stayed quiet and tried to stay out of the line of fire when he was really out of control.
Which is smart.
Yeah. But she was also, they said, no pushover. The women were always coming on to him. And she didn't like that at all. She wasn't going to put up with other women trying to come on to her, her famous boyfriend. There was one time at a restaurant, they were out having dinner, and this woman came up and asked for her autograph, and then he gave it to her. And then, of course, she was kind of smiling at him and this and that. And she came back again, and he's, he's chatting her up too. He's enjoying the attention. She came back a third time, and at that point, Shawn was like, "Okay, that's it." So she grabbed the woman by the hair and just pushed her away from Jerry Lee, and said, "Hey, this is my man. He's with me tonight. Get the hell out of here." And he, Jerry Lee, he lapped this all up. He enjoyed seeing his,
I was just going to say, he must have loved that. Like,
oh, yeah, she's fighting another woman over him, of course, right? I mean, ego.
Absolutely.
So the first summer that she was living with Jerry Lee, her 20-year-old sister, Shelley, came for a visit. So she had driven down from Michigan with their brother, Thomas, who also brought along a friend named David Lipke. Jerry Lee saw these, one was her brother, but one was another guy, his friend. And he immediately became angry and jealous. Again, he always felt threatened by anybody around his, his woman, right?
Which is so stupid when you think about it. He's the star.
Right.
I'm guessing here that how much younger they would have been a problem, but really I don't think the age would have mattered. He was just always jealous.
Yeah, he just always was. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, he became angry. He was accusing Shelley, her sister Shelley, of trying to set up Shawn with this guy, David. But Shelley would also report that Jerry Lee was kind of hinting around at wanting to have a threesome with her and her sister. Ugh. And it's just gross. And Shelley is just like, she said, "I refuse to have any part of it." Now, it doesn't seem from what I read that Shawn would have been okay with that either.
Well, I'm not trying to kink shame when I grave that. There's nothing wrong with threesomes between consenting adults. We're talking about sisters here.
Sisters, yeah.
Come on.
That's an extra level of ick. So,
married his cousin. I don't know why I'm shocked, but still.
Yeah. But then after she basically said no thanks, he got really angry and started turning on both of them and becoming very mean. He said, Shelley reported that he began yelling at Shawn at that point and telling her to make her guests leave his house. And then Shawn, of course, being, no wallflower sometimes, said, "Hey, if they're leaving, then I'm leaving too." So that was it, right? So they all piled into their brother's car, and she says that Jerry Lee was inside just going apeshit in the house. Then he started accusing them of of stealing from the house, stealing from him. And then this is the most ridiculous part. She says he accused them of taking his jet ski. He goes, "I was driving a Camaro. We were driving a Camaro. We had no tow thing. Where the hell did he think it was?" Anyway, he watched them leave. Of course, they weren't towing anything. She said, but they were afraid because I guess Shawn was saying, "Hey, he might shoot us from the window." And so they were ducking down in the car as they drove away. I think maybe at this point she cared about him in some way or something, because she did try to call him a couple days. I mean, she could have just went home and that could have been the end of it, right?
Yeah.
But she tried to call him a couple days later, talk some sense in him, but he just really he wouldn't hear it. He was still pissed, right?
Yeah.
But we also know that he was sick a lot with stomach pain. Well, he had a terrible lifestyle. I don't know if he had some other illness going on top of that, but he had a terrible lifestyle. And then when he started having the stomach pain, some point in his life, started injecting himself with with really strong narcotics in his stomach to relieve the pain. And of course, he was addicted to whatever that narcotic was as well. But around that summer, that pain was getting really, really bad. And on the 4th of July, he was rushed to the hospital. And this is the scene where he famously almost dies. And he was diagnosed with a perforation of the stomach. So at that point, he underwent emergency surgery, but the prognosis was not good. It was reported that he had less than a 50% chance of surviving. One thing we'll see about Jerry Lee Lewis is the guy has 9 lives, man. He recovered. It took a while, but he recovered. So by the end of that summer in August, he had gotten over the worst of this illness. And he, at that point, started calling Shawn. And by this time, she had moved. She had gone home in Michigan, but for some reason, her and her sister made a move to Texas, and also her ex-boyfriend Scott had moved there too. They were all living together in a house in Texas for some reason, and I guess maybe they're trying to give their relationship a shot again, but it didn't end up working out. And then by the end of that summer, right when Jerry Lee started calling, she was on her way back to Michigan, and it was just the timing.
I was just going to say that timing, if things had been going well in Texas, she might not have gone back to him.
Exactly. So, he starts apologizing for the past. He promises her everything, of course. And then he tells her he wants to marry her. As soon as his divorce from Jaron, his fourth wife, is final. He was, like I said, he was in the middle of a divorce when all this was going on. At the time, she said no, she wasn't ready to do that, but he kept calling and, talking to her, and she was talking to him, taking his calls. He was still trying to win her back. So by the time that winter came in Michigan, and I can imagine it's friggin' freezing in Michigan in the winter, she started looking at her life and saying, wait a minute, this is not what I signed up for. I thought it was going to be a little different than this. She was, back in her hometown. She was working as a secretary. Scott still, wasn't happening. They weren't looking at getting married or, the family thing. All of that whole idea that she had of a dream wasn't happening.
Everything was going nowhere with the one I think she thought was her backup.
Yeah.
Her original love. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And it's a long, cold winter. So the timing was right. When he came to town, he picks her up in a limousine and he proposes again. He does all the right things, right? So now she starts seriously thinking about saying yes. And of course, at this point, he is going through the contentious divorce from Jaron. And he wasn't yet free to marry, but he's already saying, I'm going to marry you. As soon as this is done, I'm going to marry you. Then on June 8th, 1982, Jaron's found dead. That's, she was the one that drowned in the pool.
Right.
And she was at a friend's house. This is really,
okay.
Yeah.
That's what I didn't catch earlier. I was thinking it was in his pool.
No.
So I was like, what are the odds of two people drowning in your own home pool? Okay, well, I mean, still, what are the odds of two people you love and know drowning in a pool? But still, that's... Ugh.
Yeah. She was at a friend's home but she was alone. So it's just a really odd thing. And it would just remain a mystery. Like they just basically said it was an accidental drowning and that was the end of it.
I wonder if they ever even checked blood alcohol or anything like that. Mean, I know he was never implicated in her death, but you just have to wonder.
Yeah, no, it is very strange. But now he was free, right? But Shawn was still holding out. She wasn't ready to say yes quite yet. But then the following year, he was booked for tour dates in Europe, and this was in early 1983. So he went, he took off, went to Europe. He was gone. I'm sure he was calling her and saying, what was going on, and he was having a good time. I think she may have gone a couple of times just to go hang out with him.
Right.
But when he returned to the U.S., at this point, she finally agreed to become wife number 5. Now, her friends would later report that she was not in love with him. She said she was not in love with him, but she told them, I'm not crazy about the man, but I've never had this kind of life. She saw this, I guess, as her best opportunity, even though she knew.
I'm not sure she saw danger then. We don't know for sure that he was already smacking her around and stuff that he did to other wives. I mean,
I think it was just mostly showing his temper, that kind of thing. And she thought, well, I could deal with that.
And also, frankly, when you're young, I don't know about you, but I've been there. The guy that's jealous and possessive, it's almost kind of a thing. You're like, oh my God, he loves me so much. When you're young, you don't know any better. And if he had never been abusive, I can understand her feelings. But it's
Scott later said that Shawn called him 2 days before the wedding was scheduled to ask him if he would consider getting back together with her. Aww. So obviously she was not all in on this thing. Again, it is sad, right?
Yeah.
According to him, she said, if you just say the word, I'd come back. But he said he wouldn't consider it since everyone knew she'd left him for this old man and he could not forgive that and he would never live it down. So it just wasn't ever going to happen.
Great with the male pride. Yeah.
Yeah. But, I don't think he would have got back with her anyway. I think that was...
obviously she'd given it how many years at this point? She had, didn't she graduate in 75? And this she's waited 8 years now and he still has not proposed or done anything. I mean, can you blame her?
No. So on June 7th, 1983, Shawn Stephens married Jerry Lee Lewis at his home in Nesbitt, Mississippi. Her family came for the wedding, of course. Shawn had insisted that they fly, and they were going to drive from Michigan. And she said, no, fly down. And she promised that her new husband would fly them home in his Learjet, which is kind of a nice offer, right?
Yeah.
But the morning after the wedding vows were exchanged, now this is a pattern. As second now, she is his wife. So now things change, right? Morning after the wedding vows were exchanged, Jerry Lee got drunk and was very angry at Shawn's family's presence in his home. He's like, what are they doing here? Get the hell out. Just being a jerk, right? Yeah. And he also didn't like Shelley. He had a problem with Shelley. And she says it's because I wouldn't have sex with
I was
him.
gonna say, I guess because she wasn't down for a threesome with her sister. I mean, how dare her?
Right. So he didn't like Shelley. So he came in when she was in there with, not in front of her family, when Shelley was in another room. Jerry Lee started yelling at her, and then he slapped her. Now, he's totally like crossed the line big time at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But Shelley didn't want to tell her father. She was afraid that she knew that he was going to go after this guy and it could get dangerous, and she didn't want that. She's figuring, let's avoid a fight with this new son-in-law of his. So she only told Shawn about what had happened. So Shawn took the family, filed them in the car, and drove them to a hotel, and she booked rooms for them. And basically at this point, they just had to leave because he was just not being a very nice person.
That's also just like, it's really sad. I mean, he's such a freaking bully.
Yeah. And, he could be. He knew that he had power over this family. He had their daughter was his wife, and he had the money and they didn't. And there was all this kind of stuff going on. So just an ugly family thing going on here. But now they were stranded and they didn't have plane tickets home and they had no money. They tried to rent a car to drive to Michigan, but they didn't have enough money for that. Finally, they didn't have any choice. They had to ask Jerry Lee for a loan to get home. And then, of course, again, the bully thing comes out. He's like, I don't want your money. Your money's no good to me, blah, blah, blah. What do I care about that? So he sends Shawn to the hotel with $1,000 cash to give them to get the hell out of town. Shawn she was humiliated. And her family said she was just distraught. She was crying. It's embarrassing.
That's what I was saying. Also, it's supposed to be your wedding and the happiest day of your life, the time when your family meets the man you love. Like, how awful.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Humiliating. It's awful. Like,
yeah, just a bad start to this marriage. Hey, are you listening to the podcast Detective Trap? I am, and I'm so hooked I can't wait for the new episode to drop each Tuesday. Detective Trap is the new podcast from Wondery and the Los Angeles Times, the same folks who brought you Dirty John. In this podcast, you'll follow along with Detective Julissa Trapp as she hunts down a suspected serial killer, from gathering clues to identifying suspects and then interrogating the person suspected of the murders and disappearances of 3 women. Detective Trapp will stop at nothing to get justice for the victims and their loved ones. Last week, after identifying suspects, Julissa Trapp came face-to-face with a man believed to be preying on women in Southern California. We get to listen in to a master interrogator as she invokes her personal experience and deepest griefs as a tool to elicit information to solve these murders. You get to hear the actual audio from these interrogations. I've included a link in the show notes to take you directly to the podcast, or listen to Detective Trap on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now. While you're listening, don't forget to subscribe so you can get each episode as it drops and listen along with me. So, like I said, it seemed that as soon as Shawn married him, he considered her his property. And he was even more jealous now and controlling. She kept this from her family, but she told a friend that she felt like she was in jail, that Jerry Lee watched her all the time and even became jealous of the puppy that he'd given her as a present. She was forced to give it away because she was giving it too much attention and not enough.
God, he's a freak.
Don't you hate hearing those kind of stories? Like, God.
Yeah, I hate him the more further we get into this. I'm like, oh, don't bring the dog into this, you asshole. You gave it to her.
I know. What a jerk.
Ugh.
So so she just got married in June. She was counting the days when she'd be able to go to Michigan because Jerry Lee was booked for a concert there on August 28th. She said she couldn't wait to leave Mississippi and go see her family. I don't know. Maybe at this point she was thinking, maybe I just won't come back. Who knows? But it had just been like a month. And she just, said, I can't wait to go. But she was so lonely that she decided to bring her sister Shelley down for a visit just a few weeks after the wedding. So it was in mid-August that she invited Shelley to come and stay until they went up north for the concert. So it'd be a couple of weeks that her sister would be there, which we already know is going to be a trigger for him.
Yeah.
Her sister. But I don't know, maybe he was acting nicer now. Who knows? Because at first, the sister said that they enjoyed their visit and Jerry Lee was in a good mood. One of the first nights that she was there, they went to Hernando's Hideaway together. And Jerry Lee actually debuted his new song for them that he had written that was going to be recorded. And I guess it was going to be released soon. And he sang it for the sisters. But Shelley said that she was still being pressured by her brother-in-law to have sex, and she had to keep finding ways to avoid his advances, which is super creepy.
Well, that must be the reason why he had no problem with her coming to visit, as long as she didn't bring the rest of the family, right?
Yeah, maybe he thought he could talk her into it finally, or get her drunk, or who knows what. But she just said it was just creepy, and she just hated all of that. And now she was just trying to avoid him. So one day, the sisters were outside by the pool. Jerry Lee came out. He was drunk. He was angry. He was itching for a fight. Shelley reports this, and she says he started cursing at them. Then, in front of her sister, he struck Shelley in the leg and slapped her in the face. So Shawn, of course, horrified, gets up she's angry. She's saying, "What the hell, dude?" And then Jerry Lee backhands her in the face and then just walks away. Most likely, from what people believe, there was probably already some abuse going on in this very short marriage.
Yeah.
But now this is done in front of a witness, her family, right? Shelley, of course, was just like shocked. She's angry. She's crying. She tells her sister she's going to call the cops. Now, this is very telling. Shawn says that's not a good idea because the cops all know Jerry Lee and they're not going to do anything to him.
Ugh.
Yeah. And we'll see this.
Probably what already was hitting her then. So
yeah. Because she said nothing's going to happen to him. So maybe she had called the cops and nothing happened. So Shelley said, "Okay, then I'm out of here." She got her stuff and she took off. Shawn went back inside the house and he was sitting in the living room. The reason we know this is because his sister was there. His sister Linda was there with her kids for a visit. Now he's doing this even in front of his own family, right?
God.
Shawn tries to smooth things over with him, but he gets up and starts screaming at her and hitting her in front of his sister. His sister, leaves the house with her two kids. Doesn't do anything, just leaves the house with her kids, right?
I mean, that's kind of what you see with stars that behave this way. Like, and within history, their family just kind of puts up with it, and that's what it is. They walk away and they look away, and it's enabling.
It is.
We call that, yeah.
Yeah. So then Shawn tells him that she's leaving with her sister. Now she reports this later on to, I think it was her mother that she talked to afterwards. She told him that she was leaving with her sister, but he grabbed her and dragged her down the hall to the bedroom saying, "You're my wife. I'll kill you before you ever leave me." So Shelley had left the house. She couldn't get a ride from Shawn or anything. So she left on foot and she just hitched a ride to a payphone to call home to get a plane ticket or whatever to get home to Michigan. Yeah. So Shelley told her mother, whose name is Jan Kleinhans, about her, this abuse. And her mother said that they should give it some time. And she would call Shawn later to talk about it. So this part is really, really sad because she called her mother and she told her, this is going on. I don't know if it's the time, when you think about the time in the 80s and stuff, there was still kind of this idea that what happens between a married couple is their business.
You're exactly right. And, let everybody cool off, let everybody cool down. Let's, I know.
So she said, well, give it some time. We'll call Shawn later to talk about it, and figure out what's going on and blah, blah, blah. But before that happened, on August 23rd, Shawn's mother got a phone call. It was 3:30 in the morning. Shawn called her mother and to tell her that she was leaving Jerry Lee. And she said, if and when I can get away from him.
Aww.
So Jan told her daughter that it was the middle of the night and just calm down and she'll, call her in the morning. Again, she could have just thought, they're having a little spat. I don't know what she thought, but she just said, I'll call you tomorrow. But Shawn said it her words made it sound like she felt a little bit desperate that this was the end and she had to get out of here. Because Shawn said, I don't know if I can call you tomorrow. Whatever you do, make sure nobody calls for me here. And they hung up. At noon the following day, August 24th, 1983, an ambulance was called to Jerry Lee Lewis's mansion. The housekeeper, Lottie Jackson, had found Shawn in her bed unresponsive. The EMTs arrived and by 12:30 p.m. pronounced Shawn Stephens Lewis dead. She was 25 years old and had been married to the killer, Jerry Lee Lewis, which is his nickname. Not, I'm saying what he is. He's nicknamed the killer. She had been married to the killer for 77 days. And I did not know it was that short of a time before she died, which I thought was super, super sad.
She's the one wife that fought back, but she didn't put up with the shit. She didn't put up with the other women. She didn't, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I hate, I'm not blaming her. I'm just saying she did fight back.
Right.
I imagine that's what happened.
Yeah. They call it a mysterious death. And we're going to kind of go over some of the things that were found. And also, people can kind of make up their mind what they think may have happened. And I have a couple of ideas, and I'm sure you probably do too, once we go over some of these things. So this is what happened. Shawn Lewis was found dead on August 24th, 1983, in the guest bedroom of Jerry Lee Lewis's mansion. And it was around noon when she was found. When they came in and found her, she was on the bed with the covers drawn up to her neck. Her body was still warm, but there was no pulse and her eyes were dilated. EMTs noticed that the room was clean. There was nothing out of place. So it didn't look like there had been anything that had gone on in that room other than she had laid down in the bed and died. Right. But they also noticed as they were checking for vital signs and all of that at the scene that bruises that appeared to be finger marks were found on her forearm. There was dried blood on the web of her hand. Blood was also seen, blood drops were also seen on her hair, on her clothes, and a bra located in another room. And we'll talk about that in a minute, what that was. There was also blood drops found on a lamp and a spot on the carpet. This is the strangest thing to me. There was a film of dirt found on her. So like her body was dirty. Bruises were on her arms, on her arm and hip were found. There were broken fingernails on her hand with what appeared to be dried blood underneath.
Oh my God.
First thing that somebody had noted, as far as, the first responders, that it appeared as if she had been reclothed in a blue nightgown, moved to the guest bedroom and laid in the bed and covered.
Yeah, because wouldn't she have been in her bedroom with her husband?
Yes, exactly. Like, why is she in the guest bedroom, right? So there were bloody clothes found in the bathroom. And the bloody clothes found in the bathroom were actually found in a paper sack, like somebody had taken them off and put them in this bag to do who knows what with. There were blood drops on a door. There was a blood spot on the carpet, and bloody gauze was seen on a cabinet in another room, in a billiard room. Not sure if that was from that or something else. So this is, like I said, the first responders saw this, but they also, later on, not too much later on, but by that evening, they had taken her body to the funeral home. And the people that ran it, the morticians there at this, the name of it was Brantley Phillips Funeral Home, noted the traces of blood in Shawn's hair and under her broken fingernails. They also noted there were bruises on her arm and they looked at even closer there, and they said that it looks like there was fingernail indentions above the bruises. So like if somebody grabs you, in your arm,
digs in,
and they dug their fingernails in. Yeah. And there was also a discoloration on her neck. So when first responders arrived, this is what Jerry Lee looked like. They said his speech was slurred. He was wearing a bathrobe with visible blood stains on it. There was also blood drops on his slippers. He had a cut on his wrist and 2 long scratches from his wrist to his knuckles. Broken fingernails, blood under the fingernails, long scratches on his hand and wrist.
I mean, it's just unconscionable. I understand this is the 80s, but it wasn't the freaking 50s. How did they not arrest him right there? Like, right. Oh, God.
Yeah. There were some red flags I think that somebody should have really paid attention to. And one of them, was his appearance. Another one is that when they talked to him, after they came and said, hey, your wife's dead, it was a very strange way that this kind of happened. Try to go back to when the EMTs arrived. They were called by the housekeeper, a woman named Lottie Jackson. And she said, I went in to wake up Miss Shawn, and she was not responsive. So they went in, and that's when I, described how she was on the bed with the covers on her and all of this. Then they go to the master bedroom. They knock on the door. It's closed. And because she said, Mr. Lewis is asleep. So she was asleep, he was asleep, but they were in different rooms for some reason. So they go and they knock on the door, and the EMT said within seconds, and he's wearing his bathrobe already. So they said if he was asleep, he was sleeping in his bathrobe. And, so it was almost like he was waiting for them to come to his door. He said, well, I didn't even know how to say it. I got to tell him that his wife is dead, and he's just kind of standing there staring at me. And he said, I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. So that was a really weird thing. I think he asked, are you sure? Are you sure she's dead? And they said, yeah, we're sorry. So they said, we're going to have to call out somebody because like they do like a preliminary, like a little investigation or something, or just they have to have somebody else, not just them taking the body away. And he said, Jerry Lee Lewis told them, well, we need to, quote, find out who killed how she died. So he started to say, we need to find out who killed her.
Yeah,
and then he stopped himself and said, we need to find out how she died. So the deputy sheriff who had come wrote that down. But again, because like you said, he's in this town where everybody knows him. He's the big deal there.
Yeah, these small southern towns, especially back then, and especially with a huge star like Jerry Lee Lewis, my guess is they would take his word for whatever he said. I'm sure he said she was drunk. She was being, that's a lot of times what abusers do is they put it back on their victim, right, and say, she was being unreasonable. She was drunk. I was just defending myself and I put her drunk ass to bed. Right. That's such a cliche story, but I can imagine that that's probably what he told the cop that night.
So then later that night, Jerry Lee called after, her family was informed. He called Shawn's mother. He told her he didn't know how this had happened or why it had happened. He said they were, quote, getting along so well. But his mother said, no, that's not true, because Shelley called me and told me that you had slapped her and dragged Shelley off to the bedroom while she was there. So you weren't getting along so well.
Right.
And he said that didn't happen. And then he said this, how'd you like to wake up with your wife dead next to you? Pam said that she had been told that her daughter had been found in a different room. What do you mean, how'd you like to wake up with your wife dead next to you? He then got very angry and said, well, she's dead and I'm alive. And she said, I can't deal with this right now. And she hung up.
What a guy.
Yeah, and what a guy, right? Mm-mm. Later that night, he also called Shawn's other sister named Denise. And Denise reports that his speech was very, very slurred. And she couldn't even understand what he was saying at first. But finally, she made out, because he said it over and over and over. He said, Denise's sister's dead and she was a bad girl. Ugh. And she's like, what? And he keeps mumbling, she's a bad girl and she's dead.
Your 25-year-old sister was found dead. You're already suspicious enough. And then he's calling and saying things like this. Like, yeah. The horror and shock of losing somebody so young. And then you add that on top of it, like her poor family. Like,
yeah. Yeah. Basically they were saying they're going to say it's an accidental death. It's an accidental overdose. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But Shawn's family comes and they go to the funeral home and they allow them to come in and have a private viewing of her. Jerry Lee wasn't there, didn't know about it. When he found out that they had them given a private viewing, he went apeshit. And he told the funeral home, like, he just railed at them for doing that. And after that, he ordered the casket to be closed and nobody else to see her. And why would you do that?
Well, I'm sure there was obvious bruising. Morticians they are pretty much wizards. Oddly, the South is a very strange place, and I have a feeling we have many more open casket funerals than are the norm in the North, because I used to be married to a Northerner, and that's not something that's done everywhere. But I actually went to a funeral one time from a man whose car was hit by a train, and they covered his head with black netting and still had an open casket.
Oh, good Lord.
Nothing shocks me. And I know morticians are basically magicians. They can cover up a lot, but he obviously was scared of what they saw. And family, and again, family will go in and they will touch the body. They will hold their hand. I'm sure he was just scared more than angry, but I can also see him just, having a fit because he said, no, it's closed casket. Why did you let them look? Mm-hmm. She was his property. She was his wife. As far as he's concerned, that was his property. And technically, legally, he would be her next of kin. So.
Yeah. And what ends up happening, too, is that she's buried in his family plot. Like, she doesn't even get to go home.
Oh.
Yeah. I found that very sad. Like, her parents live so far away, and she's buried in, along his family, which, I can see if it was a loving marriage, a long-term marriage, I can see that.
Yeah.
But 77 days and Gosh, and they don't even have the opportunity to bring her home.
And it's not like they actually had the money to fight him.
No, they didn't.
They wanted to take him to court, but even if they did, like I said, technically by law within marriage, he was her next of kin. They probably wouldn't have won anyway, but it just sucks.
Right, it does. Yeah. So this is the thing that his mother was just appalled. They go to the funeral. He walks into the funeral wearing the white tuxedo and red ruffled shirt he'd worn to their wedding just 3 months earlier.
Oh,
really?
That's
not a black suit. And she said, and the whole service was about Jerry Lee. It was not about their daughter. It was like he was the center of attention. The person who did the eulogy was talking all about Jerry Lee's loss. It was like she said it was like we weren't even there. We just did not count, and my daughter didn't count. And it was horrible. So let's talk about this investigation, or lack of. The coroner did not come to the house, number one, because the coroner was out of town or something. So they call, I guess this is the second.
They have assistant coroners as far as I know, but go ahead.
Yeah. In this town, I guess the pinch hitter for the coroner was the justice of the peace, a guy named Whitley Perriman. And he came just to fill out the death report at 1:15 p.m. So within an hour or so after they found the body.
Well, he wouldn't have been an investigator. All he would do is come and basically give a signature.
Right. Ugh. He also knew Jerry Lee Lewis personally.
Of course.
He asked, okay, he's going to fill out this report. So he asked Jerry Lee how he thought Shawn died. Okay. I guess that was like, if you were doing an investigation, you were going to ask everybody, but he basically asked him to know what to put in the report. Jerry Lee told him that she, quote, took some sleeping pills. And that became what was, put down as far as this is probably how she died. So Perryman later would say, though, it looked as if Shawn, I give a lot of credit again to the journalist who did the story in Rolling Stone, because he went and talked to all these people and found out what actually they saw that day.
Like years later, whether or not they admitted it at the time.
Yeah, right. Perryman said it looked as if Shawn had been placed in the bed, that she hadn't been sleeping in it. Nothing was, out of place. It was like she had been placed there. He later was quoted in this article as saying that he thought it was odd that she was in the guest room and not in the master bedroom with her husband. Well, yeah. Perryman did not, he was supposed to call for a coroner's inquest. That was the usual process. The next thing that would happen, he would call for the coroner's inquest, when this would be 6 citizens that would be convened to hear testimony and determine cause of death. If it's anything, that seems like a mysterious death or something like that.
Unattended death
Right. So he said that he didn't do this because he was told an autopsy would be performed, so he didn't see the need.
Well, actually, don't you present the findings of an autopsy to the coroner's inquest?
Yeah, maybe. It seemed like that would make more sense.
Yeah, that is generally how they go.
Okay.
They don't always do those now. They do still do them in other countries, though, and I know that the autopsy does come first.
Now, the autopsy, I would think, would be whoever the county coroner is, right? Does the autopsy?
Yes, especially in an unattended death. But
yeah, not in this instance.
Not for Jerry Lee.
The sheriff actually contracted the autopsy to be performed by Dr. Jerry Francisco. Now, Dr. Jerry Francisco was famous for having conducted the autopsy on Elvis Presley. He's a private guy. He's somebody that you pay. In Elvis Presley's case, he concluded in his report that Elvis had died of heart failure, which nobody ever really bought that.
No.
Right? They knew that he was a bad drug addict, and
it's more than likely a drug overdose, but yeah.
Right. But he said heart failure, and that was what was put in the official report for Elvis's death. So Jerry Lee would actually pay for this autopsy, which kept it private. All the way around, it's just crazy.
All the way around, they're breaking the law.
If nothing else, it's very out of the ordinary. I'll put it that way.
Mississippi in the 80s, in a small town with a huge famous man. So not at all surprised, but yeah, that's all against the law. But okay.
Surprisingly, they actually did have the scene of the death, where the death happened, processed the day after that she was found dead. And they said this was not out of the ordinary because it was Jerry Lee Lewis's house, that bullet holes were found in various walls and windows of the house because he used to like to shoot off a gun inside his house, apparently.
Yeah, they probably didn't find that all that strange. But
they didn't, but they did find these bloody clothes in the master bedroom in that bag, like I said. They found shards of a broken glass on the floor of Jerry Lee Lewis's bedroom, the master bedroom. But there was no large pieces that identified what had been broken. And they also found a 9mm pistol on his bed table. But Dr. Francisco reported in his report was no foul play, and he attributed her death to pulmonary edema or fluid in the lungs due to causes unknown. But he told the sheriff that it was consistent with a drug overdose.
No, it's not.
Yeah,
No, it's
I
not.
thought that was odd. I'm like, what?
I can tell you this right now, which I think you already know. My mother has pneumonia, and fluid on the lungs is not necessarily caused by a drug overdose. It's an illness. It can be brought by a lot of things, but not just by taking a few sleeping pills. No.
Right. So within hours after the body was autopsied, like I said, it was sent to the funeral home in Hernando and embalmed. I mean, immediately. So that was a pretty quick autopsy.
Whatever evidence there was would have been lost. So.
Right.
Yeah.
So the sheriff, Sheriff Sowell, another sheriff, told the local paper that blood found at the scene was due, quote, to Lewis cutting his finger on a glass. And I'm like, sounds like OJ. Right?
Yeah.
And he said this is what accounted for the blood on Shawn's hand. The bruises he portrayed that were found on her body were portrayed as superficial. And he told the media, quote, there was no marks of any violence, unquote.
Superficial bruising? Like, okay, if they were on her shins from knocking into something, but no, not where they were found.
If they had bothered to ask, they have first-person account from her sister, from his sister, of the abuse that had been, going on that summer, right? But I don't think they asked. So the blood found on the clothing and the blood found on Shawn and all around the house was never tested to find out who it belonged to. So if it had been his blood, if they would have tested it, said, yeah, see, it was Jerry Lee's blood. It wasn't her blood, but they'd never tested it. People were talking and they're saying, well, what the hell's going on over there? How did this 25-year-old die? Because some people said, we didn't know her to do drugs. Like that wasn't her deal. That was his deal. So what's going on here? Jerry Lee would say that it was suicide later on, that she killed herself, which is another thing out of left field.
Yeah.
But a grand jury inquiry was convened by Sheriff Ballard to, quote, dispel rumors of foul play. It's like, well, these are rumors, and just so we could, put this to rest, we're going to do an inquiry. In this inquiry, they went by the autopsy conducted by Dr. Francisco that had been paid for by Jerry Lee Lewis and the testimony of other friends of Jerry Lee Lewis. And so, of course, they ruled that the death was accidental and no foul play was suspected. So basically went by what they had already decided was the narrative.
Right. And
said that there was no foul play. So, like I said, Jerry Lee and his manager would both say that Shawn's death was due to an accidental overdose. Okay, now this is the part where they get a little bit further into the story and try to make it stick. Jerry Lee would say that he had methadone in the medicine cabinet that had been there for a very long time. And he said that she probably took these pills accidentally, thinking they were sleeping pills. Really? But no residue from pills or other drugs was listed in the autopsy. So he didn't even say, oh, yeah. I mean, they didn't even cover their own story.
Right.
By saying, oh, yeah, there was residue of 15 pills. So, or whatever. There was nothing like that listed in the autopsy.
Right.
So Sheriff Ballard again would tell reporters that Shawn most likely killed herself. Now she killed herself. Now it wasn't accidentally. It just keeps changing. And he would say that she was, quote, no stranger to drugs, which we know that's not to be true.
Yeah. Okay. Let's start blaming the victim. That's the next step.
So. That's the next step.
Of course.
This is what the investigators later pieced together. Now, this is funny because the investigation happened after the grand jury inquest.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense, but at least there was some kind of investigation that tried to be put together. And this, again, was from the Rolling Stone article that he had gone and talked to these people and to piece all this together.
Right.
So this is what supposedly happened, according to witnesses, is that some workers from the store arrived at Jerry Lee Lewis's mansion to install some drapes. And this was a little bit before noon that day. They knocked on the door and waited for almost a half an hour before the housekeeper, Lottie Jackson, arrived at the house. She hadn't been there.
Oh,
and
so
yeah.
Well,
she wasn't there. So only the people that were in the house was Jerry Lee Lewis and Shawn.
Yeah.
So they were trying to get in because they were supposed to put these drapes up, but they had to wait. Nobody would come to the door. So Lottie came to the door right before noon and tried to get in using her key. But then Jerry Lee came to the door. and let her in. He then sent her to the master bedroom, reportedly to awake his wife because the Drake people were there and she needed to deal with that because, that's woman's work or something. That's actually what she said. And Lottie then returned to the workers and asked them to wait in the den. Now, this is after she's gone to the bedroom, to the master bedroom, not to the guest bedroom. Okay.
So she's playing it cool.
Yeah. So she comes back to the workers and tells them, please wait in the den. There's something, we're dealing with something here. And this is allegedly what happens next. She goes into the master bedroom with Jerry Lee for about 15 minutes, and then ambulance arrives about 15 minutes later. So apparently at that time, they called the ambulance. When the ambulance arrives, like we said, Shawn was in the guest bedroom, not in the master bedroom. Mm-hmm. It's alleged that Lottie Jackson redressed Shawn in a nightgown and helped clean her up while Jerry Lee helped to place her in the guest room, because the blood-stained clothes belonging to Shawn were found in the paper sack in the master bathroom.
Oh, so that makes sense. So she was originally in the master bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, and this again was much later, a deputy named McCauley filed a supplemental report a month after the grand jury verdict that stated he saw Lottie cleaning up the master bedroom that morning after he knocked on the door there for several minutes trying to get in. Mm. He said that she came to the door and he could see her cleaning things up and putting things in, bags and whatever. Now, this is Jerry Lee's version. He said that him and Shawn were watching TV in the master bedroom when Shawn went to the bathroom, came back and said that she took some sleeping pills. He said he was concerned and asked how many, and she said not too many. And then they went to sleep. He also said that he kept waking up during the night to check on her. Why? He also later on, again, made another statement saying, and I told her, if you took too many, I'm going to call an ambulance. And she said, no, I didn't take too many. So then he says he woke up when the Drapers arrived, and that's when he saw Shawn in the bed. Her lips were blue. Now he's saying that she's in the bed with him, right? He says he couldn't wake her. He was angry at that point and grieving, who knows what. He smashed the wall with his hand and cut his thumb. And then he started walking her up and down the hallway, shaking her, trying to wake her up. That's how he says she got the blood on her. That was his blood.
You know what? Some of this smacks is true. It's that whole thing of every lie has a little bit of truth. Remember how he told his mother that he woke up how would you like to wake up in the bed with your wife dead? Mm-hmm. He probably beat the shit out of her, did a lot of that, but probably didn't think that he'd killed her, but forced her to go to bed. And then he woke up the next day and tried to revive her and walked her up and down the hall.
Wondering about that discoloration on her neck. Like we've heard about this in a lot of cases, the strangulation, you don't know how long or how much pressure. And everybody's different. So who knows, what happened there. So then he says he laid her on the other bed, and then he called to Lottie to call the ambulance. But like I said, the ambulance driver was called by Lottie. He met her at the door. She took him to Shawn's body. They then went to the master bedroom. The door was closed. She knocked, and that's when she said Jerry Lee was asleep, but he had come to the door already in his bathrobe within seconds of their knocking. And then she told him, remember the EMT testified to this, told him that Miss Shawn couldn't be woken up, but he already knew that.
Yeah.
So this whole thing was staged.
Later, then he's contradicted himself.
And it's covering for him. And it's definitely staged, right, for the EMTs. And that's when the EMT told them that she was dead. But here's the other thing that the reporter found, again, by talking to Shawn's family and friends, which nobody else did, is that we know that Shawn called her mother that night, but she also that night called her ex-boyfriend, Scott. The phone was answered by his sister. He was not home. Shawn asked his sister about Scott and wanted to know if he still loved her. This is so sad.
It's so sad.
And then what Scott's sister reports to this journalist is that Shawn asked her to meet her alone on August 28th at the concert that Jerry Lee was coming. Again, she's still planning on going up to Michigan for this concert, and she's looking forward to that. That's the whole thing. But she's now asking Scott's sister to meet her there at the concert when she goes to Michigan.
She's reaching out for help from anyone.
And she keeps saying, you promise you're coming, you promise you're coming. Just several times she kept asking her, now you're going to come for sure, right? And then she said, yes, I'm sure. Shawn said that she would call back the next day to make plans for them to meet when she went to Michigan. She was in the middle of a sentence with the girl when the phone went dead.
Oh.
This was the night she allegedly died. Yeah. So what does that tell you? Remember,
he probably snatched the phone. I mean,
nobody else was there. Nobody else was at the house but her and him.
Imagine how lonely and scared she was.
Now, here's the thing that I kind of sussed out from other things that I found. A part of it was in this article, and part of it was in something else I read. One thing that was in the coroner's report, but this is weird because there was a large amount of fluid found in her stomach.
Well, that's different than around your lungs. They don't seep through. That's not how that works.
Right.
So,
and somebody had wrote and said, the amount, and I didn't write down the amount, but the amount was like a large amount for a person her size. Now, is it possible that she was held underwater, possibly in the pool? And this is what I've
done that before. So
there's this mysterious death of the fourth wife, right?
Yeah.
In the pool. Now, this is what I wonder, because her sister Shelley had said that they would be out by the pool house, and the pool house was just like another house, and it had a phone, it had. Shower. I'm wondering, was she in the phone? Using the phone in the pool house when she was talking to Scott's sister.
That makes a lot of sense.
Did he catch her on the phone, heard what she said, or maybe didn't hear what she said, but just got, upset, angry, jealous, whatever about it? He caught her, and then he dragged her to the pool. It might answer why there was dirt on her body.
Yeah, I had not gotten to the part about the fluid in her stomach, but just the dirt, it made me wonder if she had tried to run out and he caught her and they fought in the grass or the dirt. But that makes a lot of sense too. She just picked up the phone in their bedroom. She had to go somewhere to get away from him to actually make that call. She might have tried to wait until he passed out or thought that he passed out, but
because everything was, I thought everything could have happened in the house. Whatever happened could have happened in the house, if something happened. No, of course we don't know.
Her clothes were wet. They said they had blood on them. There's no indication that they said that her clothes were wet.
Yeah, I don't know. They didn't say that. But it's so weird because I thought, okay, all of this could have happened in the house. Something could have happened. They could have gotten a fight. It's possible she could have said, I'm ending it. I'm going to take these pills, whatever. That's also possible. But I just kept going back to why is there dirt on her body? And of course, the bruises and stuff, that could have been from a fight. And then, like you said, people get in a fight and she could have now felt distraught and taken something and ended her own life. It's possible. It's possible. You have to.
And also going back to that pulmonary edema, maybe he was kind of couching. Probably, if there was fluid found in her stomach, there was probably fluid found in her lungs.
Right.
He had to drown her. And instead of saying that, he acted like it was this pulmonary condition of fluid around the lungs, which, is kind of cheating and at the same time admitting that there was fluid. Do you see what I mean?
Because I guess you have to account for it or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was the whole thing where I thought, okay, the fluid in the lungs, what does it have something to do with the pool? Because we already have a history of some weird pool stuff going on.
Wouldn't you kill to actually see that autopsy report? Because up until the fluid in her stomach, I was wondering, did they x-ray her head? A lot of times that happens with abuse victims, and it doesn't mean that it's not still murder, but he's clobbered him over the head and he thinks the fight's over and they put her in the bed and then the next day he wakes up and she's dead. Right. So I was curious about that, if she had a skull fracture, since they found blood in her hair.
Right.
God, there's any number of scenarios, honestly. But
there really is.
Water in her stomach is crazy.
And, if they had really done an investigation, there might be more answers, but there's not. And so that was the thing that I just was like, that's another, theory that could have happened, is that, because I just keep going back. There's always one thing in these cases that it just kind of nags in my mind. Like, why is there dirt on her body? And then you said he could have, dragged her. She was trying to run out and he dragged her. And that makes sense too. But I also think, what about the fluid in the lungs? What is that? Could that account to that? She dragged her to the pool and held her underwater. There wouldn't be a lot of marks on her except for...
It would be the fingerprint marks on her arms.
And they said there was discoloration on her neck. So maybe she wasn't strangled, but maybe she was held... you hold the head down that way.
Hands, because he had scratches on his hands.
He had scratches on his hands.
That she had been in an altercation with somebody. And so did he. So did he. He should have been photographed that night. Her body should have been photographed. Like, there should have been a full-on investigation.
Yeah.
It's unconscionable. And like I said, this wasn't the freaking 50s.
Right.
Not that it would have been okay then either, but I don't know if it's stardom or being a small town or what it was. But yeah, they totally failed this woman.
Yeah. And I think it was a combination of, and everybody in the town seemed to be his friend. Like all of the big people in charge seemed to be friends, or they had done favors for them, but because the thing is that they all knew that Jerry Lee Lewis was a pain in the ass. He was constantly wrecking his cars into trees and, founding behind his wheel, dead ass drunk. And they would just like wake him up or take him home, or that's what they did for him. And they're like, oh yeah, it's Jerry Lee. And everybody knew that. There were stories like that. We just take care of him and we take him home and we don't charge him and we don't give him a ticket or whatever.
And that's not all that unusual. And again, I hate to keep comparing it to OJ, but how many times were the police called to the house and OJ was told to cool off?
Yeah.
How many reports did they have? And, we have her on 911 saying, you guys come out every time you don't do anything.
Right.
And it makes you wonder, had they been called before for this sort of thing? Or,
Right.
That's what always kills me about the whole OJ was set up theory. Bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah.
There
because
were fans that loved him, that came to the house and always gave him a slap on the wrist. Like,
yeah.
I've never believed that.
So. But all of a sudden, everybody's out to get him, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't make
I mean, in this case, I think it's even worse. Like, they didn't even try.
They didn't even try. Later on, there was an interview with Jerry Lee Lewis, and he's saying, it's just really sad, that she killed herself, and I don't like that. I don't believe in that. I mean, I'm like, dude, shut up.
It's so religious.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. It's just sickening, because it basically stayed on the record as a suicide.
Or like an accidental suicide, basically.
They kept going back and forth on it, and they said it was a drug overdose, basically. And it could have been accidental, and it could have been intentional, that they didn't really know. So 8 months after her death, he married for the 6th time.
Of course he did.
To Carrie McCarver, and they were married from 1984 to 2005.
Wow.
This is what's so...
Again, a long, long marriage.
Yeah, a long marriage. But he first met Carrie when she was 10. At a Toys for Tots benefit, and she said, I knew I was going to marry him someday. I'm like, oh my God.
He's a pedophile. There's just no word for it. Like, my God, I missed that.
They met again when she was 18, and they started seeing each other. Well, I did the math, and that was the same time he was seeing Shawn.
Oh, of course it was.
So they had one child together, Jerry Lee III, born in 1987. He, like we talked about, his money problems. He filed for bankruptcy in 1988. He was $3 million in debt with $2 million owed to the IRS, which doesn't seem like a lot now, but I guess it was a lot then. It's a lot, but it's not like a lot.
It's not like Nicolas Cage a lot, but yeah.
No, it's not like Nicolas Cage money. Yeah. He moved to Ireland in 1993. It's believed to avoid the tax man. He said that's not true, but it's funny because as soon as they resolved all of that, he moved back to the U.S. in 1997, right after.
Yeah.
All of that was taken care of. He married his 7th wife, Judith Brown, in 2012, and they are still married today. She, believe at the time they were married, was maybe close to 30, and he was 70.
That's practically elderly to him.
Oh, yeah. But he was really elderly at that point. On February 28th of this year, he suffered a mild stroke, but he's still kicking.
And the son of a bitch is still alive.
He is now 84 years old.
And I imagine that is why Judith is still alive and not divorced.
Well, it sounds like she's kind of like his nursemaid in a way.
Yeah, with that big of an age difference, that's basically what you're signing up for.
Yeah. He's like, this is the one I've been waiting for my whole life. I'm like, dude, shut up. I can't take it.
God, yeah, he's trash.
If you look anything up about this, it says his 5th wife died of a drug overdose. Everywhere. That's what it says. Which we don't even know this because that's not even in the report. If she had taken all these pills, wouldn't that be in her stomach contents?
Yeah, exactly. Well, if they were able to find water there, and that whole housekeeper thing, that gives me Marilyn Monroe vibes. You know how there was like hours between the housekeeper found her and the actual police were called? I've always been one of these people that went back and forth on whether that was suicide or murder. Like, there's a really interesting long-form podcast on that. But the thing that's so shady is, why are you so beholden to this man? Is that housekeeper a millionaire now? Like,
yeah. Well, they did say that she had been with him a really long time. She wasn't like, she had been somebody who had worked for him since, he was young,
sure.
So her loyalties apparently lied with him.
Yeah. Well, they always lie with the person with the money.
Well, yeah, there's that for sure. And, but it's just sad that her story didn't get out there at all. And that's basically her legacy in the media, is that she died of a drug overdose and she was doing drugs.
It's really sad.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. And I just feel for her family because of that, because, they have a different story to tell and nobody has asked them. Let's see how long this guy kicks around. He'll be 100.
Yeah, he will. It's always guys like that. Like I said, they'll outlive us all.
So even if, let's say that he wasn't responsible for her death, she was despondent after being married to him for less than 3 months, enough to kill herself. Does that say anything about how, he was as a person and how he treated his wife?
Well, yeah, like let's play devil's advocate. Maybe he didn't, shove her head in the pool or the bathtub or wherever. Well, why didn't he call an ambulance when he rolled over and saw her blue lips?
Exactly.
None of that. All of that smacks of a lie to me. Like I said, again, within every good lie is a little bit of truth. I think he knew damn well that he beat her up. I still lean towards, head fracture. There could have been a fight even in the pool, maybe, between the two of them. And I think he was just shut the hell up. Let's go to bed. And then when he woke up and found her that way, thought he could awaken her. That to me, for some reason, smacks of truth.
Yeah, it's at that point, I think it was just damage control.
Yeah,
and maybe waiting for the housekeeper to come because he needed help cleaning up what happened and figuring out a story. So that is the Lewis story as we know it. Yeah. And I just want to once again thank you for being on the show today. I really appreciated your perspective.
I'm doing stuff with you. This is great.
Yeah, no, it's always fun. And I know the listeners always love it when we do something a little bit out of the ordinary here and have a little discussion with somebody who really knows true crime. And to that end, I want to make sure that people know that your podcast, Southern Fried True Crime, is a weekly podcast, correct?
Yes, every Friday.
And it's a different true crime case every week. And so if you guys are saying, oh my gosh, Esther's going on a break, there's plenty to listen to. Because Erica's been doing this for a little while, right, Erica?
Yeah, I'm close to hitting my 80th episode. It feels I can't believe it sometimes when I look at the number. But yeah, I think we have some crossover. I often hear from people and they're like, well, you heard about you on Once Upon a Crime. And I just love that.
Yeah, because it's kind of the same format that I do as well. It's where you're going to tell the story with all the research and scripted from beginning to end. But then again, of course, always focused on crimes from the South, which there's obviously quite a few.
Yes. That's my whole shtick. Justice here is very Southern fried. And one more thing, I really hope that we get to be booth buddies again at CrimeCon.
Yes, CrimeCon! I'm so excited. Yeah, I was right next door to Erica at CrimeCon last year, which was really, really fun, and so I can't wait. So I'm so glad to hear that we're both going to be back there this year, and that's going to be in Orlando.
I know. I'm so excited.
I know it's going to be great. So thank you once again. I really appreciate it, and I'll be talking to you soon, I'm sure, and I'm definitely be seeing you in Orlando next summer.
Ma'am. Well, thank you too, Esther. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks. Once again, I want to thank my guest, Erica Kelly from Southern Fried True Crime. Make sure to check out her podcast on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening now. There's only one more episode left of Once Upon a Crime for this year. That will be out next week. But also remember, you can get more bonus content on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/onceuponacrime to get more information and to join. That'll do it for this episode of Once Upon a Crime. Until next time, be good to one another.